Everyone, this is Luke with Luke F1 Fantasy back with another video coming at you following free practice 1 and 2. So this video is going to form my final thoughts video of the week as we look towards team selections. So I'm sure most of you have kind of caught up with the results of free practice 1 and free practice 2 so far. Ultimately, the one thing we can be certain of is McLaren are running away with the weekend again. 1 and 2, Oscar and Lando looking very strong at the top. And then basically the rest of the top 10 between 3 to 10th, like it's really like anybody's guess. There's been a lot of fun storylines to follow so far, with Williams looking quite fast and strong. Potential, could they crack the top 5 this week, with Carlos putting up a top 3 score in free practice 1. We have Gasly in the Alpine continuing to do good things in practice sessions. He got 6th in free practice 1 and got 3rd in free practice 2. So they're definitely showing some signs of doing well this weekend. Red Bull, as we know, kind of having a slower start to the weekend. Max still looking pretty decent. We all know their abilities to turn things on from Friday to Saturday, so they are definitely not one to miss. And then, we have Ferrari's kind of lumbering again a little bit. So kind of like as it's sort of shaking out, the way it's sort of looking from a qualifying perspective is, I think it's quite clear that McLaren and Red Bull still have the pace at that 1 lap pace, and then Mercedes close behind that. And while Williams have sort of made a jump, and there's a lot of hype around Williams, I think the hype is more about that they're definitely separating themselves from the rest of the middle of the pack. And basically you could call them better than Ferrari on a 1 lap pace. So I think the hype is valid for Williams in terms of sort of how they're performing currently. And I would love to get on the hype train for Williams. But I'm still considering them as sort of my team selections. But I think I'm a little bit more clear as to what I need to see from Williams, both drivers, to be serious contentions for my teams. So looking into my team selections, then, so I'm kind of looking at sort of 3 builds, and they all have sort of different pros and cons, and I'm kind of going to walk through those ones with you here. So my first option would be, this is the team that I'm kind of coming from. On the notion that I wanted to use to save a transfer for Monaco, would be just to kind of take the 2 out of Alonso and Behrman, and then I would be putting in someone like an Albon and a Colapinto. So for this type of team, what I'm looking for is for Russell to be outperforming Max tomorrow. Just going to solidify that Mercedes are probably going to outscore Red Bull Racing. So I'm definitely looking for Russell to outperform Max with this type of build, as well as looking at someone like an Albon that he has an opportunity to qualify like P6 or higher. So I know he hasn't necessarily pulled that together this weekend yet. He's kind of had a P8 finish mainly. So only if he kind of looks that strong would I consider going for an Albon in this type of team. And this type of team will kind of set you back 107.6 million. So it's kind of affordable for a lot of teams. But in the event that sort of Albon isn't looking that good, maybe he's more qualifying in like P9, 10, then I think it'd be a little bit more difficult for him to sort of get that target that he needs to increase his budget, which I believe is like 6 points and 18 points. So if he's more like a P8, P9, P10 pace, then I think I might move off Albon and then kind of just stick with the boring old Stroll version of that, which again, for someone like Stroll, I'm kind of hoping that he doesn't sort of qualify P11, P12, because I think that even then that kind of puts the 1 pointer at risk. So kind of Stroll, I'm kind of hoping that they'll probably sort of qualify a bit more like towards P15, P16, and so gives a bit more flexibility for that 1 point increase to see. And he is not a bad hold for Monaco as well. Now, the next type of build is more of a differential against Mercedes, and that would be to kind of go with a Red Bull Racing and Colapinto build. And then it kind of leaves me with 13.8 million to kind of play around. And again, the options here are really to kind of either go with an Albon or even a Stroll into that for those same reasons as we discussed. So for this type of team, for me to kind of consider the Red Bull kind of aspect of the build, I'd say I definitely want to see Max outperforming Mercedes, and especially Russell in particular, as well as Max looking that they were like just fixed things overnight again, and he's now got a chance of securing a pole, if not pole, then second place. Then, as well as Yuki at least kind of like helping to fill out the points as well. So as long as Yuki's kind of looking as if he can like solidify like a P7, P8, then I do actually like the idea of going with Red Bull over Mercedes, because I think they'll end up scoring more points. But it would take 3 moves to get into this, so that's kind of something that we'll think about as we look forward towards later in the video. And then I will talk about the third option, although I'm not really too keen on this just yet, because I think a lot has to go right for me to want to do this one. But it's the Williams, George Russell, and Colapinto build. So this one for me really needs a lot to happen. And it really is banking on the fact that Williams look like they can get 2 cars in the top 6, or both cars in top 5. So, and that's just because there's maybe a bit of hype around that they can do. Like I think at certain times today they had some blistering fast paces tracks, but I think a lot of the hype is actually around how close they are now to Ferrari, if not above Ferrari. And whether that's a notion of like, have Williams improved that much, or have Ferrari just sort of like come back to the pack a little bit? And it's probably a little bit of both in hindsight. But I think for to really consider Williams a second constructor, like I think I need to see them a lot closer to Mercedes and Red Bull, and I think there's still there is clearly it's still a gap between those two and Williams. But that's the only time you'd consider Williams in this one, is if they are looking strong for a top 5. Then I think you can slip them in, because then they will certainly will outperform Mercedes, and then you could sort of like supplement some of those points with Russell too. So and then that again is another 3 transfer move. So one of those teams kind of gives me some flexibility for Monaco, and the other 2 don't. And it's still hard to sort of pick which one am I sort of going with, because there's obviously pros and cons for each, and the budget changes between each are probably, there's some that are slightly better than others, but it's not sort of super significant. And so I'm kind of looking towards like next week in Monaco, and what assets am I looking to wanting to own. And the 2 that come to mind is like Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. I also think Albon is a good asset for next week to also see a price increase as well. So I'll start with this team, with team 3. So if I'm kind of wanting to get into a Tsunoda and Gasly build, I mean, it's quite easily doable with just swapping out the drivers and putting them both in. Like they will have, like their prices would have changed, but sort of as you can see, I've still got 5.5 million in the back. So that one's obviously doable within this build. But I'd have to stick with a B-tier constructor again, because I couldn't really afford to jump into Mercedes or Red Bull. And again, I would have to burn a 3rd transfer to get into it. So 1, I can't afford it, and 2, I need to burn a transfer. So I think that's why I'm kind of leaning off the Williams build right now, because I don't think it will. I think it kind of more limits the next week what I do. Although the caveat to that is if I stuck with the Russell, Colapinto, and Williams build, I would also be, and if it goes gets through this week quite smoothly, there is a chance that you could play limitless on this team in Monaco, should you want to do that. So that's the kind of like the ifs and buts for that build. Now, if we go to the Red Bull Racing build that I had with Albon, Colapinto, and Red Bull Racing. So as you can see with this one, I'll have used the 3 transfers this week. So if I want to sort of get into Gasly or Yuki, I can't actually do it with just one transfer because I just won't have enough to get in, like even a Gasly. Or if I stuck with, or a Gasly, or yes, if we sort of put Colapinto in there, like I could get into a Gasly by taking out Albon. But like I said, I think Albon actually might also be kind of good for Monaco as well. So to swap him out for one or the other, maybe kind of in that situation where you're swapping out someone that could easily get 0.2 versus someone that could potentially get 0.6. So that'll be a conversation to weigh up next week. Yeah, so the Red Bull Racing build doesn't really help out too much for next week if I'm looking to get in those assets that we talked about, Gasly and Tsunoda. But if we go back to sort of like the original team, or sort of maybe the more standard team for this week, where you stick with Mercedes and McLaren, the Colapinto Albon build. Remember, I'd be having 3 transfers in Monaco for this one. So I believe from here, I would be able to run, a variation where I take out Colapinto and put in Gasly, who would now be 7.6 million, having lost a little bit. So it's when we have to fit him in right now, but next week we would be able to. And so I might, when I kind of maybe take a bit more of a holistic view over the team selection, I think I like the idea of maybe running Albon and Gasly over 2 weeks than I would do, say, a Williams build over 2 weeks. Yeah, so all in all, how I would sort of like rank these, I think I'm kind of leaning towards sticking with the Albon, Colapinto, Mercedes build. I think I just can get to roller transfer, and then it gives me flexibility to move into a Gasly for the following week. So those are my sort of 3 builds that I'm looking at. The ones that I didn't really talk about was kind of still like kind of throwing Lance Stroll into the mix. And Lance for me kind of does take in consideration, as much as I'd love to prefer to run Alex Albon, I think I'm much happier to, much more confident in the Williams being able to sort of secure sort of a top 6 finish. It kind of just depends on how they look tomorrow and where they qualify. So like Lance also qualifying in like a P11, P12 kind of scares me with his ability to get that 1 point. But if Albon doesn't quite crack the top 5 and he's more in the 6 to 10s, then I may sort of take a gamble on sort of Stroll and trying to get that 1 point. So he's still in the considerations for this week, and for all those teams, it's just really a flip of the coin between Alex and Albon, and sort of which one you feel is going to get you those points. And I think both are fine to be able to run over the 2 weeks. So yeah, unless there's sort of a real blistering pace from Red Bull and Max or Williams, I think I'm going to need to see that in order to move off Mercedes. But I'm quite happy to move off Mercedes if I do see some blistering pace from Max and from Yuki to a certain degree too. So it really just comes down to how does those positions from P3 to P6 shake out, and kind of go with that. And I think with the teams that we've talked about, I think there is enough variation for the next week that I would be fine running the majority of these teams for 2 weeks. And there's some, plays to kind of swap in a Gasly or a Sainz or a Stroll, wherever you may need to. I think we're all kind of working within the same budgets, which is kind of interesting, because if we have more of these cheaper assets that are more going to help us, such as like Strolls and Colapintos and Gaslys, then the idea of budget building is kind of like, well, we have 112 million, or we have 130 million, but still the most optimal team in that range is still only going to cost you like 107 or 108. But it's still sort of about trying to build a bit of budget, because when you want to be that team that starts to take advantage of a meta team that now costs like 114 million, 115, then you're just a little bit closer to that. So I think the name of the game right now is that we're close to maybe moving into a bit more of a higher super meta, with maybe getting a Yuki in or getting an Albon in. Potentially even a Red Bull Racing, and sort of some of those teams are going to start to be in sort of that 114, 115 mark. So I think we're just trying to avoid any sort of huge drops in price for the next 2 weeks, and then sort of reassess where we are maybe after the triple header. But hopefully that's sort of just a few rambles, probably gone on for too long once again. But yeah, that's just some rambles, some thoughts. But yeah, hopefully everyone has a good weekend, and we'll catch you next week and see how we all did.